It was a rainy Saturday night, and the storm outside seemed alive, growling with thunder and flashing lightning like sharp fangs. I was at a restaurant with some friends, laughter and warmth shielding us from the cold, sinister night. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and reluctantly, we decided to leave. The world outside felt darker than it should, the rain falling in slanted sheets as we said our goodbyes. I walked to my car, the wet pavement gleaming like black glass under the streetlights. The atmosphere felt off, heavy, like the air before a storm. I got into my car, shivering as an unexplainable chill crept up my spine. I shook it off, started the engine, and drove towards home. The drive was long, and fatigue gnawed at me. As my eyelids grew heavier, I turned on the radio to stay awake. Instead of music, a grating static filled the car. I fiddled with the knobs, frustration mounting, when suddenly, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. It was too late to stop. I swerved sharply to the left and slammed the brakes. The car screeched and came to a halt. My heart pounded like a war drum as I stared ahead, the rain hammering against the windshield. I stepped out, my breath visible in the cold night air. The road was empty. No footprints in the puddles, no sign of a person. Only the oppressive silence, broken by the steady thrum of rain. I told myself it was exhaustion, climbed back into the car, and drove on. But the unease stayed with me. The rain seemed louder, the shadows thicker. Every glance in the rearview mirror felt like I was daring something to appear. I reached home at 1 a.m., drenched in sweat despite the cold. As I stepped inside, my phone rang. It was Andy, one of the friends I had dinner with. His voice was shaky, edged with terror. "Hey, did you get home okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" Andy hesitated before speaking again. "On my way home, I saw someone who looked just like you, standing in the middle of the road. I thought I hit them, but when I got out to check, there was no one there." A shiver slithered down my back. "That's impossible. I saw something like that too." Before I could finish, Andy interrupted, his voice rising. "I called the others. They saw the same thing." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, dread curling in my stomach. I took a long, scalding shower, desperate to wash off the unease, and crawled into bed, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. The next morning, we agreed to meet at the restaurant to talk about what happened. I arrived early, but as I approached, my stomach twisted into knots. The restaurant was gone. All that remained was a charred skeleton of what it had been. Firefighters moved through the wreckage, like shadows, pulling out bodies blackened by the flames. The stench of burnt wood and flesh was suffocating. An onlooker stood nearby, watching the scene with wide, hollow eyes. I approached him, my voice trembling. "What happened here?" "Fire," he whispered, his gaze never leaving the wreckage. "A big one. No one got out. They all burned." My knees weakened. "That's not possible. We were here last night. We left before midnight." The man turned to look at me, his face pale and drawn. "If you were here last night..." He paused, his eyes flicking behind me. "Then how are you still alive?" A cold wind whipped around me, carrying the faint scent of smoke. I turned back to the scene, just in time to see the paramedics pulling out a body. Something about it was familiar. The face. It was the man I spoke to moments ago. My heart thundered in my chest. I spun around, but he was gone. I could feel him watching me. Before I could process it, another body was pulled from the wreckage. This time, I froze. It was the figure from the road, the one I nearly hit. His lifeless eyes seemed to follow me, and his charred hand pointed in my direction. Andy arrived, his face pale as the ash around us. "What? How could this place burn down?" "I don't know," I stammered. "But something's wrong. I keep seeing them, the people from last night." "What do you mean?" Andy asked. Before I could answer, I saw the paramedics carrying out 4 more bodies. My blood turned to ice. The faces. It was us. Me, Andy, the other 2 friends. Burnt, lifeless, and unrecognizable, yet unmistakably us. I turned to Andy, my voice cracking. "Do you see that?" But Andy wasn't there anymore. Neither were the paramedics. I stood alone, surrounded by the ashes of the restaurant and the echoes of my own panicked breathing. Somewhere in the distance, the static of the broken radio hummed, and a voice whispered, "You never left."